In this video, I'm going to show you how to use database functions. I assume that you know how to create a range name, and I also assume that you've used functions in Excel before. So what are database functions? There's a special set of functions called database functions in Excel, and they allow you to define a database, a data set, and then analyze the data in that database based on selected records only. So we're going to use an example here. Let's assume that I have a travel agency and I have several marketing reps and they sell trips to tourist groups. So for example, Kenny sold a trip to 100 passengers. That trip actually has to go through customs. The trip has been signed and it costs $25,000. So I'm going to use database functions to actually calculate some statistics on this data set. The first thing I need to do is I need to actually create a range name for my data set, which Excel calls a database. So I'm highlighting cell A1 through F11. I'm putting my cursor in the name box, and I'm going to actually name my database trip_database. And I'm going to hit the enter key. So I have to first name a range for my database. Then I need to name a range for my criteria section. And notice my criteria section has the exact same column headings as my database, and that's by design. That's how Excel relates the two. And I've included a blank row underneath those column headings. So I've selected A14 through F15. I'm going to put my cursor in the name box, and I'm going to call this trip_criteria because it represents my criteria section. And if I quickly go to my Formulas tab and click on the Name Manager, notice that I have two range names now. One called Trip Database and one called Trip Criteria. Now I'm ready to actually use a database function. So I'm going to put my cursor in cell C18, and I want to use a database function that's going to tell me the total amount for trips, and then I should be able to enter in different criteria in my criteria section, and that total amount will be recalculated based on whatever criteria I enter in. So I'm going to put my cursor in cell C18, and I'm going to click on the F of X button next to the formula bar to insert a function. In my category area, I'm going to select database from the drop-down if it's not already selected. And notice all the database functions are listed there, and they all begin with D. And I need to use DSUM, so I'm going to select that and hit the OK button because I told you I wanted to find the total amount. Every database function uses 3 arguments. The first argument is always the name of your database. So I'm going to type in trip_database. The second argument is the field that you want to sum in this case. So I want to sum the amount. So I'm going to click on cell F1, which has my field name, amount, in it. And then in the criteria function, I'm going to type in the name of my criteria section, which is trip_criteria. And I'm going to hit OK. Notice my trip amount is $464,000. I'm going to change my formatting right now. And that actually represents the total of all 10 trips. But the interesting thing about database functions is I can actually go into my criteria section and I can put in a criteria. So in this case, under contract status, I'm going to type in signed because I want to know the total amount for just my signed contracts. And notice my database function recalculates based on that criteria that I typed in. So there are $264,000 in signed contracts, trips. Now, if I put in a marketing rep of Patty, because I want to know how many Patty's responsible for that are actually signed, notice 120,000 shows up as my total amount. And if I went back and I looked up there, I could see that Patty does have 2 signed contracts, and one was 55,000 and the other was 65,000, and that added together represents 120,000. I'm going to delete both criteria values from my criteria section. Notice total amount recalculates. And I'm going to demonstrate one more database function. So I'm going to put my cursor in cell F18. I'm going to click on my f of x button, and I want to calculate another database function, so I'm going to make sure database is selected. And this time I need to find out the number of trips, so there's a function called DCOUNT, which allows me to add up numeric values. So I'm going to select DCOUNT, hit OK. The name of my database is trip_database, so same name again. The field that I'm actually going to count this time is not the amount field, but I'm actually going to count trip ID. So I'm going to click on A1. And then I'm going to type in my criteria argument, I'm going to type in trip criteria. And I'm going to hit OK. And notice when I have no criteria values entered in, I have 10 trips. But if I typed in a contract status of signed, notice that there are only 6 of my 10 trips are signed. And oh, by the way, that's $264,000 in total. And again, if I went in and put in a marketing rep of Patty, the number of trips that Patty's responsible for and are signed happens to be 2 at $120,000 in total value. So to recap, database functions are specialized functions that allow you to identify a database, and then using criteria, those database functions recalculate on the fly.